All right, hi everyone. We're gonna start with page 9. I'm sorry, some of the classes got a little further, but we're gonna all start at page 9, where it says, "My mother is a stubborn as she is as stubborn as she is religious." That's where we're gonna start today, just so all the classes are on the same page. It also gets us back into kind of what the story is and what he's talking about. Okay, so here we go. We're on page 9. My mother is as stubborn as she is religious. I'll give you guys a second to get there. My mother is as stubborn as she is religious. Once her mind's made up, that's it. It's the devil, she said about the stalled car. The devil doesn't want us to go to church, and that's why we gotta catch minibuses. Whenever I found myself up against my mother's faith-based obscenities, I would try as respectfully as possible to counter with an opposing viewpoint. Or I would say, the Lord knows that today we shouldn't go to church, which is why he made sure the car wouldn't start so that we would stay home as a family and take a day of rest, because even the Lord rested. Ah, that's the devil talking, Trevor. No, because Jesus is in control. And if Jesus is in control and we pray to Jesus, he would let us car start. But he hasn't. Therefore, no, Trevor, sometimes Jesus puts obstacles in your way to see if you will overcome them. Like Job. This could be a test. Ah, yes, Mom, but the test could be to see if we're willing to accept what happened and stay home and praise Jesus for his wisdom. Nope, that's the devil talking. But Mom, Trevor, sequoia. Sequoia is a phrase with many shades of meaning. It says, don't undermine me, don't underestimate me, and don't try me. It's a command and threat all at once. It's a common thing for HOSA parents to say to their kids. Anytime I heard it, I knew it meant the conversation was over. And if I uttered another word, I was in for a hiding. At the time, I attended a private Catholic school called Maryvale College. I was the champion of Maryvale sports day every single year. And my mother won the mom's trophy every single year. Why? Because she was always chasing me to give me a hiding. And I was always running not to get the hiding. Nobody ran like me and my mom. We had a very Tom and Jerry relationship, but she was the strict disciplinarian. I was the accordingly naughty. She would send me out to buy groceries, and I'd come right home because she'd be using the change from milk and bread to play arcade games at the supermarket. I love video games. I was a master at Street Fighter. I could go on in a single play. I'd drop a coin in, time would fly, and the next thing I knew, there would be a woman behind me with a belt. It was a race. I'd take off the door through the dusty streets of Eden Park, clambering over walls, ducking through backyards. It was a normal thing in our neighborhood. Everybody knew that Trevor child would come charging through, and his mom would be right behind him. They're right behind him. She could go at full sprint in high heels, but if she really wanted to come off after me, she'd do this weird move with her ankles and heels would go flying. She wouldn't even miss a step. That's when I knew. Okay, she's in turbo mode now. When I was little, she always caught me. But as I got older, I got faster. And we sped when speed failed her, she'd use her wits. If I was about to get away, she'd yell, "Stop, thief," knowing it'd bring the whole neighborhood out against me. Then I'd have strangers trying to grab me and tackle me. I'd have to duck and dive and dodge them as well, all the while screaming, "I'm not a thief, I'm her son." The last thing I wanted to do that Sunday morning was climb into some crowded minibuses. By the second I heard my mom say, "Sequoia," I knew my fate was sealed. She gathered up Andrew, and we climbed out of the Volkswagen and went to catch a ride. I was 5 years old, nearly 6 when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. I remember seeing it on the TV, everyone being happy. I didn't know why we were happy, just that we were. I was aware of the fact that there was a thing called Apartheid, and it was ending, and it was a big deal. But I didn't understand the intricacies of it. What I do remember, what I will never forget, is the violence that followed. The triumph of democracy over apartheid is sometimes called the bloodless revolution. It's called that because very little white blood was spilled. Black blood ran the streets. As the apartheid regime fell, we knew that the black man was going to rule. The question was, which black man? Spats of violence broke out between the Inkatha Freedom Party and the ANC, the African National Congress, as they jockeyed for power. The political dynamic between these two groups was very complicated, but the simplest way to understand is the proxy war between the Zulu and the Xhosa. The Inkatha was predominantly Zulu, very militant and very nationalistic. The ANC encompassed many different tribes, but the leaders at the time were primarily Xhosa. Instead of uniting for peace, they turned on one another, committing acts of unbelievable savagery. Massive riots broke out. In the evenings, my mom and I would turn on the little black and white TV and watch the news. A dozen people killed, 50 people killed, 100 people killed. Ultimately, thousands of people died. Eden Park sat not far from our sprawling townships in the East Rand. The Xhosa and Kadihong were the sites of some of the most horrific Inkatha ANC clashes. Once a month, at least, we would drive home and the neighborhood would be on fire. Hundreds of rioters in the street. My mom would edge the car slowly through the crowds around blockades made of flaming tires. Nothing burns like a tire. It rages with a fury you can't imagine. Whenever the riots broke out, all of our neighbors would wisely hold up behind closed doors, but not my mom. She'd head straight out and we'd inch our way past the blockades. She'd give the rioters this look, "Let me pass. I'm not involved in this chaos." She was unwavering in the face of danger. That always amazed me. It didn't matter that there was a war on our doorstep. She had things to do, places to be. It was the same stubbornness that kept her going to church despite a broken down car. That careless Sunday, we made our circuit of churches, ending up at a white church. When we walked out of Rosebank Union, it was dark and we were alone. It had been an endless day of minibuses, and I was exhausted. It was 9 o'clock at least. In those days, with all the violence and riots going on, you did not want to be out late at night. We were standing at the corner of Jellicoe Avenue and Oxford Road, right in the heart of Johannesburg's wealthy white suburbia. And there were no minibuses. The streets were empty. I was so badly wanted to turn to my mom and say, "You see, this is why God wanted us to stay home." But one look at the expression on her face, I knew better than to speak. We waited and waited for the minibuses to come by. Under apartheid, the government provided no public transportation for blacks, but white people still needed to show up to mop the floors. But white people still needed us to show up and mop the floors and clean their bathrooms. Necessity being the mother of invention. Black people created their own transit system, an informal network of bus routes, controlled by private associations operating entirely outside the law. Different groups ran different routes, and they would fight over who controlled what. There was bribery and general shadiness that went on, a great deal of violence, and a lot of protection money paid to avoid violence. The one thing you didn't do was steal a route from a rival group. Drivers who stole routes would get killed. Being unregulated, minibuses were also very unreliable. When they came, they came. When they didn't, they didn't. Standing outside Rosebank Union, I was literally falling asleep on my feet. Not a minibus in sight. Eventually, my mother said, "Let's hitchhike." We walked up and down. After what felt like an eternity, a car drove up and stopped. The driver offered us a ride, and we climbed in. We hadn't gone 10 feet, and suddenly a minibus swerved right in front of the car and cut us off. A Zulu driver got out with a iwisa, a large traditional Zulu weapon, a war club. Basically. It used to smash people's skulls in. Another guy, his crony, got on the passenger side. They walked up the driver's side of the car we were in, grabbed the man who offered us a ride, pulled him out, and started shoving their clubs in his face. "Why are you stealing our customers? Why are you picking people up?" It looked like they were going to kill this guy. I knew that happened sometimes. My mom spoke up. "Hey, listen. Hey. He was just helping me. Leave him. We'll ride with you." That's what we wanted in the first place. So we got out of the first car and climbed into the minibus. We were the only passengers in the minibus. In addition to being violent gangsters, South African minibus drivers are notorious for complaining and haranguing passengers as they drive. This driver was a particularly angry one. As we rode along, he started lecturing my mom about being in the car with a man who was not her husband. My mother didn't suffer lectures from strange men. She told him to mind his own business, and when we heard him speaking Xhosa, and when he heard her speaking Xhosa, that really set him off. The stereotypes of Zulu and Xhosa women were as ingrained as those of the men. Zulu women were well-behaved and dutiful. Xhosa women were immoral and unfaithful. And here was my mother, his tribal enemy, a Xhosa woman, alone, and 2 small children, and one of them mixed child, no less. "You're a Xhosa?" he said. "That explains it. Disgusting woman. Tonight you're going to learn your lesson." He sped off. He was driving fast, and he wasn't stopping, only slowing down to check the traffic at the intersections before speeding through. Death was never far away from anyone back then. My mother could be harmed, we could be killed, and those were only viable outcomes. But it didn't fully comprehend the danger we were in. I was so tired that I just wanted to sleep. Plus, my mom stayed very calm. She didn't panic, and so I didn't know to panic. She just kept trying to reason with him. "I'm sorry I've upset you, Punti. You can just let us out here." "No, really, it's fine. We can just walk." "No." He raced along Axford Road. The lane's empty. No other cars out. I was sitting closest to the minibus's sliding door. My mother sat next to me, holding baby brother Andrew. She looked over the window as passing road and then leaned over to me and whispered, "Trevor, when he slows down at the next intersection, I'm going to open the door and we're going to jump." I didn't hear a word of what she was saying because at that point I'd completely nodded off. When we came to the next traffic light, the driver eased off the gas to look around and check the road. My mother reached over, pulled the sliding door open, grabbed me, and threw me as far as she could. Then she took Andrew and leaped out behind me. It felt like a dream until the pain hit. Bam! I smacked hard on the pavement. My mother landed right beside me, and we tumbled and rolled. I was wide awake now. Eventually, I came to a stop and pulled myself up, completely disoriented. I looked around and saw my mother already on her feet. She turned to me and looked at me and screamed, "Run!" So I ran, and she ran, and nobody ran like me and my mom. It's weird to explain, but I just knew what to do. It was an animal instinct, learned in a world where violence was always lurking and waiting to erupt in the township. When the police came swooping in on their riot gear in armored cars and helicopters, I knew, run for cover, run and hide. I knew that as a 5-year-old. Like a gazelle runs from the lion, I ran. The men stopped the minibus and got out and tried to chase us, but they didn't stand a chance. We smoked them. I think they were in shock. I still remember glancing back and seeing one of them give a look of utter bewilderment on their faces. They didn't know they were dealing with the reigning champs of the Maryvale College Sports Day. We kept going until we made it to a 24-hour petrol station and called the police. By then, the men were long gone. I still didn't know why any of this had happened. I had been running on pure adrenaline. Once we stopped and realized how much pain I was, I looked down and the skin on my arms was scraped and torn. I was cut up and bleeding all over. My mom was too. My baby brother was fine, though, incredibly. My mom had wrapped herself around him, and he'd come through without a scratch. I turned to her in shock. "What was that? Why are we running?" "What do you mean, why we are running? Those men were trying to kill us." "You never told me that. You just threw me out of the car." "I didn't tell you?" "I did tell you. Why didn't you jump?" "Jump? I was asleep." "So I should have just left you there for them to kill you." "At least they would have woken me up before they killed me." Back and forth we went. I was too confused and too angry about getting thrown from a car to realize that what had happened. My mother had saved my life. As we caught our breath and waited for the police to come and drive us home, she said, "Well, at least you're safe. Thank God." I was going to keep quiet this time. "Look, Mom," I said, "I know you love Jesus, but maybe next week you could ask him to meet at our house because this really wasn't a fun night." She broke out in a huge smile and started laughing. I started laughing too, and we stood there, this little boy and his mom, our arms and legs covered in blood and dirt, laughing together in the light of a petrol station on the side of the road in the middle of the night.